And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Tuesday, August 24th. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We are here to break down a 14-game Tuesday slate. Should be a good time. Shout out as well to OddsShopper for being the presenting sponsor of the show. Adam, how did your Monday go?
Just like every other day in the last 2 weeks. Nothing exciting. Played a bunch of really good offenses. They all sucked. The bad offenses did well. Didn't go too well.
Well, bit of a bummer. Apologies for that. But we move on to another day where we can do it all once again. Monster slate, tons to get through. So as you get in the door, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. So much content getting cranked out on a day-to-day basis. We'll touch on the schedule for the rest of the day. We'll touch on free content, all of that good stuff. But for now, I say we start it off because we got a lot to talk about.
Sounds good.
Pirates and Diamondbacks, 4.1 run implied total for the Pirates, 4.4 for the Diamondbacks. JT Brubaker and Madison Bumgarner. Bumgarner pulling a little bit of ownership here, 7,100, pulling 13% ownership on DraftKings. On a slate where there's 28 pitchers is kind of wild. Let's start there. Is Bumgarner in play for you today against a kind of crappy Pirates team?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's got a really, really good matchup against the Pirates. I don't think he's a good pitcher at this point in his career, but he's not terrible. And this isn't a bad park to pitch in. Like Bumgarner's somebody that at this point, I think when you take him into hitter-friendly parks and put, decent lineups up against him, he's someone I typically like to take hitters against. But today you're just putting one of the worst offenses in baseball up against him in a park that's favorable for pitching. And you also got a favorable salary at 7,100. I'm not sure that I've ever recommended rostering Madison Bumgarner in the last 2 years, but I'm there today. Hopefully it goes a little bit better. It's kind of like the Hendricks spot yesterday. Obviously Hendricks kind of had a mediocre game, but that's how I feel about this one too, where it's just like, this isn't a guy that I normally play, but everything looks good. The matchup's good. The price is good. The park is good. I don't really have a reason not to roster Bumgarner.
Yeah, he showed up in 12% of my sims, so I think the ownership is spot on. I don't really have much else to add. 7,100 against a crappy Pirates team with this run total seems pretty reasonable to me. I will say this. I like betting on the Pirates outright. That is something that I did earlier today. So if anybody is interested, Pirates money line looks pretty solid. Any interest in Brubaker at 6,700?
If the ownership stays as low as it is, I have some interest. He's only projected for 3.5% ownership right now. Similar price range to Bumgarner. I prefer Bumgarner out of the two, but I do think it's worth noting that Brubaker's actually been a pretty good pitcher this year. He's struck out 23.5% of hitters. He has a 4.05 xFIP. He's had issues with home runs, allowing 2.17 home runs per 9 innings. But this park, does downplay power. The Diamondbacks don't have a lot of power. They're not a very good offense overall. I'm kind of surprised that they have a 4.7 implied run total. It seems a little high for me. Maybe it's just because it's warm in Pittsburgh today. But I do think that as a low-owned tournament option, Brubaker makes some sense. But it's not someone that I would expect to be prioritizing in a lot of my lineups.
Are you prioritizing any bats in this game? The run total is just so low on both sides. I have the Diamondbacks 12th overall, 9th in leverage. I've got the Pirates 22nd. You can sort of pick off a couple Diamondbacks bats, I guess, but ultimately I am not all that fond of either side of this game from a hitting perspective.
Yeah, I don't see much either. I guess obligatory Brian Reynolds is head and shoulders better than every one of his teammates mentioned, but and he's 4,100, but I don't know. I think both pitchers are good enough. The park's not great. Both offenses kind of suck. So I don't see a whole lot here considering it's a 14-game slate.
Yeah, this is just not the game, I guess. Other than I would have never expected Bumgarner to be at 13% ownership on this slate, just if I saw Bumgarner. But other than that, this is not really a game that I want to be in, as Jubal Cabrera at 6% ownership is the highest owned guy on either the Pirates or the Diamondbacks. So not exactly a game pulling a ton of ownership. I don't really have anything else here to add.
Yeah, same. Sean V mentioned Brubaker's run out of steam. I think it also could have to do with facing the Reds, the Cardinals, and the Dodgers back to back, but maybe.
That makes me so happy. It really does. Oh, anyway, we will keep it moving because there's no sense in sitting on a game that's not all that interesting when we can get to Orioles and Angels. 5-run implied total for the Orioles, 5.5 for the Angels. Spencer Watkins going for Baltimore. Old Spencer Watkins going for the Angels in Dylan Bundy. Watkins at 5,300, not owned. Bundy at 5,800, not owned. Any interest in either Watkins or Dylan Bundy?
I mean, if I went to either one, I would go to Bundy because he at least has some semblance of strikeout stuff sometimes, but neither one looks particularly good here. You know, Bundy for the season's only struck out 20% of hitters. We know the Orioles actually do have some power in their lineup. They have a 5 implied run total. It's a park downgrade for him going into Camden Yards. It's warm and humid in Baltimore, just like it is every other day. So yeah, it's. I'm not looking to either guy as someone that I feel good about or really want to get to. If I had to go to one, I would go to Bundy before I went to Watkins.
Yeah, Bundy showed up in 8% of lineups for me. That doesn't make me excited, but you know, it is what it is at 5,800. Watkins, not a guy that I'm interested in getting to. Offense, on the other hand, certainly interested here. I have the Angels number 1 overall, with the caveat that they are dead last in leverage. I have the Orioles 5th, a little bit over-owned as well, but this is definitely a game where we're going to need to get some offense. What do you want to do in general? I'll throw it open to you. Are you preferring the Angels side or the Orioles side?
I like both. The Angels getting a lot of ownership here. The Orioles getting a bit less, but also, you know, lower chance of success. But I like mixing in hitters from either team. I mean, Bundy's been home run prone basically his entire career with the exception of last season. And now he's coming back to Camden Yards, which is a really difficult place to pitch. Watkins so far has not been very good overall. He's been a lot more vulnerable against right-handed bats, but that's just not something that I really think continues going forward. I think he just ends up being a pitcher who's just really bad in general. And I'm certainly not going to shy away from guys like Shohei Ohtani and Jared Walsh, but it does bump up, you know, Justin Upton at 3,400. Justin Upton at 3,400. If you wanted to take a shot on Joe Adell, if he's in the lineup, I think it's about as good a spot as he's ever going to be in. And then on the Orioles side, just anybody with power. So really you're talking kind of surprisingly, but like 1 through 7, you know, Mullins, Mountcastle, Mancini, Santander, Stewart, 1 through 5 are the priorities. But for a catcher, Pedro Severino has decent power. For a cheap shortstop, Ramon Urias is a, you know, league average hitter. So I think that there's ways you can attack these teams, even if it's not full stacks, you know, grabbing 2 or 3 of them, just hoping to, you know, run into a couple of home runs.
It's a tricky game, just given the ownership for me. You know, Ohtani obviously pulling a ton of it. Justin Upton obviously pulling a ton of it. I'm happy to fill out with some of this Angels team, but I don't think they'll be my primary, just given the over-owned nature. I think I'm more likely to get to a little bit more Baltimore, just given the lesser ownership in the aggregate. But it's probably like the overall best hitting environment on the day, so you have to pay attention to it at least a little bit. I know you mentioned it, but we've got, where's it hiding? Baltimore 6th overall in the top stack tool. Angels are 1st. Both teams showing up a little bit over-owned. So take that for what it's worth. Any bats that like are major priorities to you that aren't Shohei Ohtani?
Jared Walsh.
Yeah, Walsh popping for me. Upton, obviously the second biggest guy. Walsh would be 3rd for me. So nothing else really to add here for Orioles and Angels. Interesting game. Big total too. And I totally agree with it. So next one up on the list, Phillies and Rays. We're moving pretty good here. 4.4 run implied total for the Phillies, 4.7 for the Rays. Ranger Suarez and Drew Rasmussen. Neither guy pulling any ownership. Can you justify going to Suarez or Rasmussen?
I think it's a pretty tough sell on a slate of this size. Suarez has been good overall this year, but most of his numbers are out of the bullpen. As a starter, his strikeout rates come down as you would expect. He's only struck out 17.5% of hitters. He has a 15.9% walk percentage so far as a starter. Not really what you want to see there. And it's not an easy matchup at all. You have Tampa Bay, who has tons of power in their lineup, and they're getting a positive park shift coming out of Tropicana, going into Citizens Bank. Kind of surprised, actually, the Rays only have a 4.7 implied run total here. On the other side, Rasmussen has started to get stretched out a bit. He throws hard. He can strike some guys out, but you know, again, negative park shift for him through 56 pitches his last time out at 6,800 on a 14-game slate. I think it's pretty tough to get to someone thinking that, you know, maybe they get to throw 65 or 70 pitches.
I like him from a betting perspective. I did actually bet on the Rays already. Check out the breakfast menu for that bad boy too. 2 strips of bacon. We're going really crazy today, but I have Rasmussen going 4 innings. That's not nearly going to be enough, even though he does have monster stuff. Anxious to see how he ends up progressing in terms of just like general baseball sense, not necessarily just DFS. From a bat side, I have the Rays 8th, 6th in leverage. I think they're showing up a little bit underowned. I really like the righty power here, assuming Nelson Cruz is going to be back in the lineup today as well. 5,200 stands out to me. How do you feel about the Rays bats?
Yeah, same boat for me, because while Suarez has been very good against righties this year, he's only struck out 21.9%, but he's held them to an expected ISO below 100, which is extremely good. 270 expected WOBA. But you still have to keep in mind a lot of that was out of the bullpen, where these guys are only seeing him one time. It's typically difficult for pitchers to get through a lineup a second or third time. So far as a starter, he's still been fine. He hasn't allowed a home run yet, but I just don't totally buy into it. And even if I did, I think that Tampa Bay is a potent enough offense, especially in this park, where I really like getting to them when they're low owned, because they just have so many guys to hit for power. And again, they're getting in much more favorable hitting conditions than hitting in Tropicana. So as long as Tampa's not getting much ownership, I think they look really good here.
Nice. Yeah, third in top stacks, not pulling much ownership. I think third might be a little high, but after you get through the Angels in Boston, there's not a lot of separation. That's like a pretty clean. Like there's really not all that much different between Tampa Bay and say like the Yankees at 4%, 4 and 5.5 is not really much to me. So I do like the Rays just given their current ownership situation. Do you want to go to any Phillies on the opposite side against Rasmussen?
I don't really think so. Obviously guys like Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto are always viable options because they're really good, but it's a good Tampa bullpen behind him. Rasmussen himself has been good. Again, as a starter, 26% strikeout percentage, 3.34 xFIP. I just don't really see much on Philly.
Yeah, you and me both. Herrera in the leadoff spot is really the only guy that I would try to target. I mean, like clearly Harper, Realmuto, Hoskins, like I don't mind having those guys, but Herrera is the guy that popped the most given his ownership. I just don't have much else here. Rays bats definitely the primary thing. And if Rasmussen can ever go longer in games, boy, is he going to look interesting as a DFS pitcher because he can rack up the Ks. Blue Jays and White Sox. We're not even going to need that extra 15 minutes anymore. We're going to be good at this. 4.5 run implied total for the Jays, 4.1 for the White Sox. Jose Barrios, Dylan Cease. Not really any ownership coming here. So talk to me about Barrios at 6%. Are you interested here? I feel like he's going a little underrepresented.
Yeah, I do too, because the White Sox are definitely a dangerous lineup, but there's some strikeouts in there too. And Barrios is just a good pitcher overall. He's struck out about 25, just shy of 25% of hitters this year, 3.82 xFIP. It's not the type of matchup that I would really be looking to target at, regardless of his ownership. But if he's only going to get around 6%, it's not like he's really expensive. 8,600, I think, is a very fair price tag here. 4.1 implied run total for the White Sox is certainly reasonable. I'm definitely interested in Barrios as long as the ownership stays where it's at. When you look at the pitchers around him in terms of top two pitcher percentage, you have 17.5% ownership going to Charlie Morton right now against the Yankees. You have 21% going to Marquez against the Rockies, or against the Cubs rather. I'm not going to disagree with either of those or say that they shouldn't be getting ownership, but I think that it does sort of highlight the lack of ownership that Barrios is getting.
Yeah, it's really weird to me. He popped a lot in my sims. I might have him in a little bit long, like too long. I might have to knock an out off of him. I think that'll bring him down in sort of the top pitchers tool range. But for right now, he's showing up as a guy that I want to get to quite a bit and doubly fun, a guy that's not pulling the ownership that I would have expected. So sign me up on that side. Any Cease for you, 8,800.
I think it's a tougher spot for him. Someone in chat mentioned they're afraid of Barrios in the spot because the White Sox can blow him up. They definitely can, but kind of like almost any pitcher can get blown up like any slate, especially we've seen that even more so once they've started cracking down on what they're allowed to use to control the ball. So it's kind of just one of those where like there's a lot of variance in baseball. I try not to worry too much about, this team can blow him up. It's more so, when he pitches well, are there ways to get strikeouts? And that kind of translates over to why I don't like Cease as much as I like Barrios, because not only are the Blue Jays certainly capable of blowing him up, if they had a bunch of strikeouts in their lineup, I would still say that Cease is interesting to me at low ownership, but it's more difficult when you consider that not only are the Blue Jays a really dangerous offense, they really just don't have strikeouts in their lineup. They have, I believe, a bottom 5 strikeout percentage on their active roster against right-handed pitching this year. So it just becomes a really, really tough spot. Could Dylan Cease, he's really good in terms of strikeout stuff and just his overall his stuff. Could he go dominate them? Absolutely. But it's just a really low probability spot, I think, when you consider that, one, they're really good at hitting, and two, it's not like they're the Yankees where, they have a lot of power, but they also are going to strike out a lot. When they don't have a good game, typically they're still putting the ball in play. So I think it's harder to make a case for Cease than it is for Berríos here.
Yeah, like for Berríos, I think we're looking at it the same way. I don't care what its downside is at all. Like, if he's going to score 5 points or get bombed and give up -15, I don't really care. That lineup's probably not winning a tournament anyway. I care about his probability of reaching his upside and what that upside looks like. Whether or not the White Sox can blow him up is mostly meaningless to me. I need him to just be good, and the probabilities of him being good are what matters. Average to an ass beating is really not all that interesting to me at 8,600.
Yeah, I mean, don't play Berríos in cash, I don't think. But
right, exactly. Now, from a Bats side, I got the Jays 11th, 8th in leverage. They're not pulling any ownership. I think you could probably justify a little bit of Toronto here against Cease. Do you have any interest in the Jays, who are where in the world? No, way lower than I have them in top stacks.
Yeah, I mean, I always have some interest in the Jays when they're not pulling ownership. Like I rostered them yesterday against Lynn. It went pretty much as expected, but they're just the kind of offense where if the opposing pitcher isn't on top of their game, they're going to just go nuts. They're so good. They also are a very good fastball hitting team. Dylan Cease does have a slider. He throws 41% of the time to right-handed hitters. So that's a bit of an issue for the Blue Jays, I think. He throws his fastball about 46%. He has a very good one. I think maybe you see the Blue Jays get to that, but he also has the secondary pitches that, he doesn't have to rely on his fastball. So it's not a matchup that I like for Toronto, but in tournaments, I'm kind of matchup agnostic with teams like the Blue Jays. I don't really care who they're facing. If they're low owned, I will just take the power upside they give me.
Yep, you and me both. I will not be getting too much of the White Sox. I have them 24th in this spot. Berríos not getting enough ownership, so it's not really helping there. I don't really find them to be like a leverage side. Do you, outside of just like individual bats grabbing one-offs from the White Sox, do you have any interest in them as a stack?
Not really. Berríos not getting ownership. Luis Roberts cheap, so he looks good. But for the most part, the rest of the team's priced up, at least the guys that I would want. I think it's pretty tough to get the White Sox here.
Based on 3-run shots question, you said, when was the last time Toronto banked a slate? And obviously you responded with, I don't know or care. I mean, you got to think about it like this. We can think whatever we want about Toronto, but we'll use Cleveland as an example. They've got basically a 5% chance of being a top stack. It's basically telling us that if we do that a lot, we're going to expect them to bink a slate 1 out of every 20 days. Like, it's not, these teams shouldn't be the top stack all that frequently. It should be pretty hard to like remember those days on bigger slates.
Also, while we're in
chat, how it works.
Jay Dreiling said Toronto is overrated in his opinion. They just have flashy names. They have the second highest WRC plus in baseball this season. They have the third highest ISO in baseball this season. The flashy names are flashy for a reason.
Yeah, that is a very true statement. They are, I mean, the AL East is, I think, unquestionably the best division in baseball. Anytime you're going up against the Red Sox and the Yankees pretty regularly. Obviously, the Rays are fantastic too, but you expect the Red Sox, and you can pad your record on the Baltimore Orioles, that's for sure. But I mean, we're talking about a team that has a 117 run differential, positively speaking, I might add. It just gets overshadowed because of 2 additional teams in their division. They've been unlucky, but they project for an 87-win team, and they've been aggressively unlucky. By the way, 4th most runs per game in baseball. So
their broadcasters, actually, I was watching, this is completely not related to DFS, but related to what you were just saying about run differential. I was watching a Blue Jays game the other day, and their broadcasters actually kind of had an interesting take on why they don't buy into them being as good as their run differential and don't think they've gotten that unlucky. And it's their take basically was that they're a really good fastball hitting team that looks completely lost against a certain subsection of pitchers. So there's games where they just like annihilate the opposing team and score 1 million runs. And then there's games where they like predictably just get shut down.
Fair enough. Based on Pythagorean Pat, they are 8 wins short of where they should be. They should have 73 wins. So that is the biggest mark in the league, tied with the Marlins. Based on base runs, their runs per game, realistically, 5.07. Based on base runs, 5.1. So fully warranted. Fully warranted. So if you don't like the Blue Jays, good luck with that.
I mean, to be fair, you don't need to like the Blue Jays today. It's a shit spot.
Yeah.
They're probably not going to do well. But if you think the Blue Jays are a bad offense, good luck finding a good offense.
Right. If we think that the Blue Jays will be the top stack one in every 34 days, if this data happened a lot. So, take that into account as well. Anything else for Blue Jays and White Sox?
Nope.
We're going to be on one today. All right. Schedule for the rest of the day, 2 p.m. Eastern time, PGA Strategy Show. Ben and Eric breaking down the BMW. I believe this is either like the last or second to last golf event of the year. So make sure you're checking that out. 4:45, Adam will be back with Greg for the MLB Deeper Dive. And then I will be back at 6 with Eric for MLB Live Before Lock, where I hope that Eric is not eating chalk with me today. And I mean that literally, not metaphorically. Also, free content today. MLB Player Projections. If you're looking to play any MLB DFS and you're wondering what we've got behind the paywall, well, you're in luck. Player projections are available for you for free. Check out Nightbot if that link is getting dropped in chat, or just go straight to Awesemo.com and browse to them. PGA Top Golfers free as well. Red Sox and Twins. 6.1 run implied total for the Red Sox, 4.4 for the Twins. Tanner Houck, Griffin Jacks. No ownership here. Are you rostering either pitcher?
Tanner Houck's interesting at 7,900, I think. Always a concern about exactly how deep into the game is he going to go. Coming off of 58 pitches his last time out in 4 innings, 89 pitches in 5 innings the time before that. So there's always a concern about how deep he's going to go, but the strikeout stuff is really, really good for him. 31.8% as a starter this season, 4.7% walk percentage. He's been really good. He's not that expensive. The matchup's okay against Minnesota. As long as he's not pulling much ownership, I have some interest there.
I only got to him in 3%. I have him going 4.7 innings, so nothing too crazy. I could probably bump that up a bit and have a little bit of interest, but a lot of power in this Twins lineup makes me a little nervous. Any Griffin Jacks for you?
No, thank you.
Didn't think so. So true, by the way. So true. We'll talk a little bit then about Boston Bats. They are my number 2 overall stack, but 25th in leverage. So showing up a bit over-owned. If we look at the top stack tool, it rings out the same. So what do you want to do with Boston against Minnesota?
Yeah, it's still a good spot. Griffin Jacks, I don't think is likely to be a good pitcher. He's not a highly touted prospect. He hasn't really shown much at the major league level yet. Only a 20% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters with a 281 expected ISO. Not really what you want to see when you're going up against this Boston lineup. Obviously, the lefties are in a good spot as well with Devers and Schwarber and Verdugo. So it's a really, really good spot for Boston. Certainly want to get to them, even though they are projected to be a bit over-owned. It's still a 14-game slate, so ownership as a whole in terms of overall numbers is going to be down a bit. And it's just not going to be that tough to get to Boston. So maybe not as much in the way of 5-man stacks since they are getting a bit of ownership, but mixing them in with your lower owned stacks, I think is perfectly fine. So definitely something I'm going to want to do. So, like across 150 lineups, what typically will happen is I end up getting, 50 to 60% of where the field is at on individual hitters, but I'm still mixing them in so that my overall lineup is low owned. It's just, it's a low owned stack with guys that are in a really good spot, or it's a more popular Boston stack with lower owned guys like Tanner Houck or Barrios or whoever. It's still about, just balancing out your lineup overall.
Absolutely. Twin side, I'm 9th overall, 23rd in leverage. Not really a big priority for me. Maybe a team you get 2 or 3 of, but I don't really have much to say for the Twins. I do like the first 4 hitters quite a bit.
They're cheap, but I think the matchup sucks.
Yeah, agreed. I do have the run total slightly higher, but not enough that it's going to make much of a difference here. I mean, Boston Bats are the priority. I like them more as individuals than I do as the stack, just given the ownership. But you're going to want to have a pretty good chunk of Boston just in general. I don't have anything else here.
Me neither.
Cleveland Indians, Texas Rangers, 5.1 run implied total for Cleveland, 4 for the Rangers. Eli Morgan and Taylor Hearn. Neither guy pulling any ownership. I believe Eli Morgan went nuts in his last start. I'm not expecting that again here. I don't really want to roster either pitcher, but can Morgan do it again?
Morgan's been kind of all over the place this year. He's been better than I really think that he should be. He throws like 90 miles an hour. He relies on control. He has a really good changeup. I'll give him that. Typically, pitchers like that don't have sustained success, and we've kind of seen it like start with him. He's either really good or he's really bad. There hasn't really been a whole lot of in between for him. He does have a 23.3% strikeout percentage, which I think is higher than I expected, and maybe that, it's higher than will continue, but also a 4.7 xFIP, 1.99 home runs per 9 innings. The thing that's kind of interesting though is that the Rangers are really bad and Eli Morgan's not getting ownership. So when you get a pitcher that is kind of like, for lack of a better comparison, like Kyle Hendricks-esque, where not like the current Kyle Hendricks, but the old one where he used to actually, have some big starts, it's kind of interesting. Again, it's a 14-game slate. I'm not saying go out there and just start shoving Eli Morgan into lineups, but he's at least someone that you could use, if you are stacking Boston, for example. Maybe use Eli Morgan instead of, like a 13% on Bumgarner or something like that. It is at least a good matchup for him. That being said, I doubt that I get to much just because it's a 14-game slate, and I don't think he should be a good pitcher.
So from a Bats side, I have the Rangers a bit higher than our current ownership, but I do have them quite a bit over-owned. If we look at the top stack tool right now, Texas is the most over-owned team by miles and miles. I have them as the second worst leverage stack, but I do have their top stack odds a little bit higher than we're currently showing them. Adolis Garcia pulling 24% ownership at 2,900 is kind of crazy. Do you have any justification to go to Texas?
Not really. I mean, the value is really good, but you're seeing that reflected in the ownership, and it's just a team that's really, really, really bad. Like Adolis Garcia at 2,900, Nate Lowe at 2,700. Those guys are fine, I think, individually, but really it's just on a 14-game slate. If a high percentage of people are going to use these Texas bats to fill out their lineups, I'm perfectly fine just not getting there because these guys suck. It's not like, it's completely different than, Kyle Schwarber is going to be popular against Griffin Jacks. I still want to get there. It's Kyle Schwarber. It's Xander Bogaerts. It's all these guys. If the field wants to take a stand on Kiner Falefa and DJ Peters and Yanni Hernandez, go for it. I really don't care.
If you want to do anything for this game, I highly recommend, based on the breakfast menu, dropping a little bit of a bet down on Rangers money line and Rangers on the run line. I did a half strip of bacon on both, so I do like the Texas side from a sports betting perspective. Going to be real difficult from a DFS perspective. How about Cleveland, though? Indians showing up fifth in the top stack tool, quite a bit over-owned. I agree with that as well. Seems like all of these top stacks are pulling way too much ownership today.
I actually like Cleveland here, though, because if you look at the individual ownerships, the only guys getting more than 6% right now are Jose Ramirez, Ahmed Rosario, and Miles Straw. All of those, I think, individually, their ownership's perfectly fine because Jose Ramirez is clearly a top third base option. Miles Straw is 2,800, most likely leading off on a team with a 5.2 implied run total. That's whatever. And then Ahmed Rosario is only 4K, batting second, and a shortstop. So I think it makes sense that all three of those guys are getting ownership. And then the rest of the lineup really isn't getting much. Franmil Reyes at 5,500, I think it's a really good spot for him against the left-handed Hearn. Hearn has not had success as a starter so far this year. Only a 19.6% strikeout percentage, 5.16 xFIP, 1.46 home runs per 9. Against righties overall this season, he's allowed a 194 expected ISO, 358 expected WOBA, and that includes his time out of the bullpen. So I think it's a good spot for the Indians. And I really don't think the stack, I don't think they're actually going to be over-owned. I think that the hitters that are going to get ownership are the ones are some of the best plays on the slate at their respective positions. And then when you start moving down the lineup to guys like Reyes and Oscar Mercado and Owen Miller, if he's batting sixth, these guys really aren't getting ownership. So I actually like the Indians here.
I have those top three guys a bit over-owned individually. So it's probably, I don't want to say a stay away because that wouldn't be the right way to describe it, but I am a little softer here. I just have a lot more positive leverage options that look similar to Cleveland coming up in the near future. So I don't have too much to add. I'm with you though. I do think Straw, Rosario, and Ramirez pulling that ownership makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Someone mentioned the Rangers going off the other day against Erod. The one time, and I didn't roster them on that slate for some reason, which was stupid. But if you're going to roster the Rangers, to me, I like rostering them on the slates where they are facing a popular pitcher, not just because they're cheap. Like today, they're cheap facing a pitcher that doesn't get any ownership. You're just really counting on the Rangers to have a big game, which, good luck with that. If they're facing a popular pitcher, at least you're getting more negative correlation with the field. So the times that I do go to Texas is typically when they are facing someone popular. Granted, I didn't do it against Rodriguez when I should have, but it's so hard for me to get to them when they're not facing a popular pitcher because they're just so bad.
Absolutely. Anything else here? Cleveland or Texas? Actually, who's your favorite bat in this game?
Jose Ramirez is my favorite bat, but I was going to say, as far as like a low and one-off, Franmil Reyes is fantastic.
Okay. That works for me. Mets and Giants, 4.3 run implied total for the Mets, 4.2 for the Giants. Tyler McGill and Sammy Long, which is funny to me because I went to high school with a guy named Sammy Long, not a baseball player.
I probably did too. It's kind of a common name.
Yeah. It's just funny to me because he was like very uniquely not this. Real nice guy. Just like bit of a stoner hippie type. So like really didn't profile as starter for the Giants.
That's like exactly what I think of when I hear the name Sammy Long for some reason. And two, stoner hippie type is exactly what I think of when you think of a prototypical Giants starting pitcher.
Yeah, that's fair. Lincecum obviously fit that bill for a bit. And I think we can go a little bit further. I gotta imagine Barry Zito was into that back in the day. We can keep going and going probably. I mean, I would assume that's probably like part of the appeal of wanting to play for the Giants too. It's like as socially acceptable there in the United States as it is basically anywhere else.
Yeah, I would think so. That and the Rockies, but you don't have to pitch in Coors Field.
Yeah, absolutely. And they probably want you to drink more Coors beer too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder who's going to be the first weed sponsored stadium. That'll be fun, right?
Probably Coors, right?
Well, no, Coors. You think Coors is going to get into the weed game? Is that what you're telling me? Oh, like we obviously have a beer stadium in Coors.
Yeah. Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you meant like a sign for like a weed company. No, actually named after one. Yeah, I don't know. Because I mean, like San Francisco is always going to be tech companies.
Yeah, it's going to have to be like something named after Tommy Chong or something.
It'll probably be like Seattle.
It'll probably be some Marlboro will stop making cigarettes and start making joints, and it'll be over from there. Are we rostering McGill or Long? I think McGill is mildly viable, 7% owned, 6,900, but this isn't really a great spot to me for either pitcher because I don't think they go deep enough.
Yeah, like I think McGill can go deep enough, but the matchup is brutal. The Giants are a tough team to strike out. They're a good offense overall, really top to bottom in that lineup. So I'm not really excited to get to McGill. You know, like I would, unless I just happen to have a really popular lineup of hitters, like I would much rather be getting to Bumgarner at 7,100 than getting to McGill at 6,900. On the other side, Long only threw about 44 pitches his last time out. Not sure what he did in his last minor league start. I can pull that up, but I don't think he's particularly stretched out here. He's got good strikeout stuff, or at least good strikeout upside, but I don't anticipate him going far enough into this game that I want to roster him.
Oh, man, now I can't stop thinking about like weed themed teams. Like somebody mentioned the A's are already green. That would work. I was like, okay, that'd be fun if they did, instead of sausage races, like joint races, but nobody actually finishes. It's just like the guy that gets the furthest down the track. It'd be perfect. One guy like doesn't even start the race. He's just like looking into the sky and stuff, like trying to catch butterflies. It'd be incredible. Long
went 5 innings in his last start at AAA. So I don't hate Long here. Like if you told me he throws 5 innings at 6,600, he's got really good strikeout stuff. He made 5 total appearances, 3 starts at AAA this year, struck out 43%, made 4 starts at AA, struck out 36.7%. Steamer projects him for 9.5 strikeouts per 9. I don't know, kind of interesting in tournaments. Not something that I'm super confident in though.
I only have him going 4 innings, so maybe we should call him Sammy Short.
We need to get off this game. Yeah, like I don't think he goes. I think he goes 4 or 5 innings. It's just a matter of how many strikeouts does he rack up, and also what do the other pitchers in this price range do.
I have both teams as positive leverage options, Mets and Giants, but they are 16th and 18th overall. So I don't get the sense that I want to get to a lot of offense, but they are, at least for me, under-owned. What are your thoughts on either side of the game?
I don't like a whole lot. I think the Giants are the more appealing of the two teams. They are just a good offense. McGill has dropped off a bit as the season's gone on. It's a positive park shift for the Giants getting out of San Francisco. So I don't mind getting into some Giants bats here in tournaments. The Mets, I think, are a harder sell for me because I think Long is good. I think he's going to give you, 4 or so innings, and then you're going to get a bullpen game after that, which is never very appealing.
Yeah. I'm with you on the Giants. Like I have them 16th, 5th in leverage. I think you could pretty easily get to that top section. I just think there are going to be more high likelihood stacks to get there. But at the same time, if you're trying to get a little different, being on the opposite side of at least any of McGill's ownership is helpful. I would have liked to see more pitching ownership to really push this one forward. Anything else, Mets or Giants?
Best athlete on the Awesemo roster has to be Pete, right?
You would think, right?
Yeah, like it has to be. No one else has like played a sport competitively in like a decade, and he fights competitively. It's got to be him.
Yeah, I would say that it has to be Pete. I'm trying to rack my brain thinking about it, but that one makes the most sense. I mean, we do have an NBA player as a CEO, so there is that option. But yeah, I would say Pete. And then after that, it's a grab bag, I think.
Yeah, I mean, after that, it's probably none of us are really in shape anymore to play sports competitively, and it's going to come down to what sport we're playing.
I was going to say, we probably go like this a lot, and like sometimes you're the peak and sometimes you're the valley, depending on like how big the losing streak or winning streak is. Like, it's just sometimes you're on a bender, sometimes you're not. I don't mean you personally. I mean like me, all of us. Like we're all dipping between like, oh, I ran this month, or I didn't get out of my seat because I was too busy buying rock NFTs.
Right. Yeah. I've been drunk for 2 weeks straight. Let's go play basketball.
Yeah. Josh is not going to say himself, but I think that there are certainly times during the year where it could be me when it's not Pete. Yeah. Look, Pete can kick the shit out of all of us. Like it's not fun to know that kind of stuff. It makes me sad and makes me wish that I grew up.
Jake's probably second. He's just younger than all of us and hasn't given up on life yet.
Yeah, it probably. I don't know his like full athletic background, but he looks like it doesn't seem to be a problem for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the youth probably helps a lot. We'll see him in 10 years. Well, actually, at that point in time, I'll be 46, and I certainly won't be the answer to this trivia question. Anyway, let's keep it moving. Got to talk a little bit about promos. I hope you got in on the annual NFL package because that got put on ice yesterday. So all we got right now to talk about, WR. Get that fantasy football draft kit for season-long and best ball leagues. Same projections, tools, and analysis that go into our DFS stuff. Draft Wingman, which if you missed it, yesterday morning, 9 a.m., I did a best ball draft on Underdog using the Draft Wingman tool. I thought it went really well. You guys could go check that out. It's on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. We got best ball rankings and stacking guide, trade value chart, and more. $35, up to a $35 credit for Underdog and FFPC leagues. So you can get this package for 33% off when you use the promo code WR at checkout. That'll be less than $10 for everything we have to offer for season long and best ball. Again, that promo code is WR. Don't miss it.
Lindquist is in the conversation too.
I have no idea.
He played college golf and had like D2 college basketball offers.
I didn't know about the basketball. I knew he golfed. I didn't know about I didn't know about basketball. Marlins and Nats, 4.3 run implied total for the Marlins, 4.2 for the Nats. Jesus Luzardo and Eric Fedde. No real ownership coming here. Luzardo at 7%, Fedde at 4%. I think both of those numbers are about right. Cue Sean V being like, Luzardo's the worst pitcher in the entire slate. That'll be a real fun one. He already said
that if you didn't read that.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Of course. Anyway, he's 6,400 today against a Nats team that has like 1.5 real major league hitters. So do you like either pitcher?
Like definitely isn't the word I would use. I think that they're both rosterable at relatively low ownership given their matchups because I really just don't know who wins out between a not very good Eric Fedde and a terrible Marlins team and a not very good Jesus Luzardo and the Nats AAA squad. So there's definitely upside for both of these guys just based on it's in a good park. It's good matchups for both. Neither offense is good. So I'm not saying that, I'm really confident either guy pitches well because, again, it's Eric Fedde and this version of Jesus Luzardo. But, Luzardo does supposedly have arm talent. He hasn't put it together this year. Only a 21.8% strikeout percentage as a starter, 13% walk percentage, 5.29 xFIP. All those numbers are terrible, but he's also priced for those numbers and he's facing the Nats. So I don't mind taking some shots if you need savings. And then Fedde this year, 20.6% strikeout percentage, 4.2 xFIP, 1.31 home runs per nine. He's been better than Luzardo, which, again, doesn't say much. But he is also relatively inexpensive. So I think both pitchers are fine. Neither guy is someone that I would want tons of money riding on, given how not very good they are. But the matchups are good.
Yeah, I kind of feel the exact same way. Price tags work. Nothing too crazy. Offenses are bad. Good park for it. Nats Bats. I have 14th, third overall in leverage. It doesn't make me feel good at all. And I actually think that their run total is too high in comparison to where I have them. So I don't know, probably skip offense in this game.
I think the Nats are useful. So we talked about all the ownership that the Rangers are getting because they're really cheap. The Nats potentially have a minimum salary. Victor Robles leading off. Yadiel Hernandez is essentially minimum salary. Carter Kieboom's basically minimum salary. This is still a really, really cheap team. Even Josh Bell is $4K. And, not that that's close to minimum salary, but it's still pretty inexpensive. I think you can use the Nats as a lower owned value stack. Like, they're not any worse than the Rangers are.
No. No, not really. Oh, and the Rangers obviously pulling a lot more ownership. So, Like I said, I have them third in leverage. I think there's a path there. I just don't think that they're good enough overall, given the park, given the fact that Luzardo's not really pulling all that much ownership. It's weird. We've made our way through 8 games now, and I feel like every top stack is probably a bit overowned. Every spot where you can get some leverage isn't really pulling enough from like the opposite side of the pitcher. Like, it doesn't seem like we're getting that synergy of like having two things at the same time happening where it's like we got a real standout option. I feel like there's warts on everything so far.
Yeah.
Tough slate.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else for Marlins or Nats.
Me neither.
Braves and Yankees, 4.9. What's this DraftKings notification? Nope, useless. 4.9 run implied total for the Braves, 4.2 for the Yankees. Charlie Morton and Andrew Heaney. Now we get to some ownership. We can talk a little bit about pitching. Morton at 18% on DK, $9,000. Andrew Heaney at 15% ownership at $7,500. I agree with the Morton ownership. I don't necessarily agree with the Heaney ownership. I'm curious to see where you stand for the pitching in this one.
I don't really get it either. I mean, I understand Heaney has really good strikeout stuff, but Atlanta kind of seems like the worst possible lineup for Heaney to go up against. The strikeouts are certainly there. He's struck out 29.3% of right-handed hitters this year, but 236 ISO, 188 expected ISO, 331 WOBA, 298 expected WOBA. Like, I guess he's gotten a little unlucky, at least according to those numbers, but we just see it, start after start after start where it's not like he really runs bad on fly balls. I don't think, I don't think that it's, he gets a disproportionate number of balls that should be caught going over the wall. He just makes like 5 mistakes a game where he just leaves a pitch right down the middle and it gets blasted kind of around his strikeout. So on the one hand, at 7,500, that's a really good price tag for someone that has Heaney strikeout stuff, 27.4% overall this season. But when you're going up against this Atlanta team that just has tons and tons of right-handed power, it's a situation where if Heaney's not getting ownership, I am interested because he does have the ability to really put up a good game at 7,500. But right now he's getting 15% ownership. I would rather be getting to Madison Bumgarner against the Pirates at similar ownership than going to Heaney. And I would like to get to Atlanta against him if he's going to get that kind of ownership, and Atlanta's not going to get ownership.
I got Heaney at 5% coming out of the Sims with the 15% ownership. So I think we're in the same sort of realm there. I would much rather get to Atlanta, which this is my favorite team for today. They're my number 4 overall stack, number 1 in leverage. No one owned more than 4.7% of the time. That's Soler. This is unquestionably the spot I want to be. And I hope that Heaney maintains that ownership. Atlanta is my number 1 stack today, bar none.
Agreed. Wait, did you say they're your number 1 stack?
They're my number 4 overall, ignoring ownership. They are my number 1 leverage stack. So ultimately, it's going to make them probably be at the top of the heap.
Yeah, like right now, just kind of looking at everything, they are in that same ballpark with like Tampa Bay, except I think that I like the matchup a little bit better for Atlanta than I do Tampa Bay.
How are we talking about Yankees bats? This seems like a no-go for me against Morton.
Yeah, it's pretty tough sell. Like I'm kind of always in the camp that when the Yankees are low owned and facing a popular pitcher, they make some sense just because they do have the potential to go nuts. But Morton's a really, really good pitcher. You do have a favorable pricing on a lot of these guys. You know, Rizzo at 3,400, Gallo at 4,200, really stand out. But Morton's really good. He's only allowed 0.77 home runs per nine this year. 3.33 xFIP is one of the best on the slate. If it were a smaller slate, I'd have an easier time getting to the Yankees. But as is, it's pretty tough to get there, I think.
I don't know if this is real or not, but I think someone named their Zed Run horse Adam Levitan because he just tweeted about seeing it. I don't know if he's just making a joke that he did it or.
I was say, I mean, I know I'm pretty sure he has them.
I don't know. I got to pick one of those up. I think that's fun.
Yeah, I wish I got into that before.
Yeah, it's tricky. Anyway, nobody cares about us talking about Zed Run. Well, at least not on this show. Anything else you want to touch on, Braves or Yankees? I can't talk about it much more without being like, yo, play more Braves. By the way, Ben bet on the Braves today in the breakfast menu. So we're in a little bit of synergy here.
We didn't really talk about Morton individually. I do think he's a strong option. He's getting 17% ownership right now. I think that's fine. The matchup's scary. You know, the Yankees do have good hitters, but they also have quite a few strikeouts in their lineup. Basically, once you get past LeMahieu and Rizzo, Morton should be able to pick them up. So I agree that even though it's a kind of scary spot, Morton should be getting ownership, and he looks pretty good.
Yeah, I didn't really have much to say there. Like, his ownership is about what you expect. It's a really... Oh, there we go. There's a nice crash of Excel in the middle of me talking. Hopefully that just pops up with exactly where we were. It didn't. So let me get back to Braves. Ultimately, you can only want to have so much Charlie Morton at 9K in a matchup against the Yankees. Like there's an upper bound to that where you're not really comfortable about it on a 14-game slate. I think somewhere in that 15 range seems about right. I didn't really have like much of a hot take after that.
Like, I mean, I don't think he should be getting like 1/3 the ownership of Jack Flaherty. I think he should be closer.
It should be, okay.
I also think that I also think that Herman Marquez should be getting a lot more ownership than probably both of those guys.
Okay. Well, then let's talk at least a little bit about Jack Flaherty. 4.9 run implied total for the Cardinals, 3.1 for the Tigers. Jack Flaherty at 44% ownership, 9,600, going up against Casey Mize, no ownership to speak of. I like Flaherty as well. I might be underrepresenting his upside a little bit. Showed up in 27% of my sims. That's the second highest number behind Corbin Burns. 44% felt a little high, but this Tigers team stinks. It's a good park. All signs point to Flaherty being back and like fully available to go deeper in games. So I guess I don't have anything to add. Flaherty looks like one of the best options today.
Yeah, I agree. My only issue with him, for lack of a better word, is that 44% seems pretty high when you start comparing him to guys like Morton and Marquez, and others. But also, I think one of the best projected pitchers, definitely one of the guys you should be considering in cash. I would say that there's probably I haven't built the cash lineup yet, obviously, but there's probably 3 guys that I'll be going between, and Flaherty's one of them. As far as trying to decide my 2 pitchers. So I think he looks really good. It's just a spot where there are other good pitchers on this slate in good matchups where I think in tournaments you certainly could use them and get the same ceiling that Flaherty offers.
Okay. How much Casey Mize you looking to get to?
Not much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a right-handed heavy Cardinals lineup, which is good for Mize because he has really had issues with left-handed bats this year, but still only an 18.5% strikeout percentage against righties. The Cardinals lineup itself doesn't strike out a ton. 142 expected ISO allowed to right-handed hitters from Mize. To me, it's more of I maybe don't like the Cardinals quite as much because of the way their lineup is set up against Mize than actually wanting to roster Mize.
Do you have any reason to roster the Tigers bats against the ownership of Jack Flaherty?
No, I do not. If it were a smaller slate, sure, but I don't really see it here.
I'm with you. Cardinals bats, 10th overall for me, 20th in leverage, so basically middle of the pack. I don't really have anything too crazy here. I think they're basically properly owned. I'll have some, but they aren't a priority.
Yeah, pretty much where I'm at. I think it's an okay spot. Tyler O'Neill continues to be too cheap, but like I said, Mize has just done a good job of limiting power and production to right-handed hitters. The Cardinals basically only have right-handed hitters. There's a lot of spots that I do like on this slate. It's kind of just a neutral spot for me.
All right. Yeah, it's just pretty uneventful, all things considered. I don't have really anything else to add. Who's your favorite Cardinals bat?
Tyler O'Neill.
I think mine actually might be Molina, but boy, oh boy, is he not good anymore.
I just like O'Neill, especially when for one, I like him at his salary because he has a ton of power and he's cheap, but also when he's facing a pitcher that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, I think that bodes well for O'Neill because he does have a 31% strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. So taking him against someone like Mize that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, I think it sets up well for O'Neill.
Before we close this one out with 4 final games, I would be remiss to not talk a little bit about our sponsor. That would be OddsShopper. I use them very heavily in each morning prior to prepping the breakfast menu. But one of the biggest edges you're going to find in sports betting is to shop for the best line. OddsShopper makes that happen. They're constantly changing by the minute. You're going to get those updates, whether it's regular sides or totals, player props, futures, all that stuff is updated. You can get notifications on bets, on live movement, and you can get expected win percentage and expected ROI on all of the player props for baseball that are derived from our MLB DFS projections. It's perfect opportunity for you to dip your toe in the sports betting water. If you were trying to do that, make sure you're shopping around. Don't leave any money on the table. All you're doing is costing yourself something by not getting the best line possible. 4 more to go. Cubs and Rockies. 4.2 run implied total for the Cubs, 4.8 for the Rockies. Justin Steele and German Marquez. No ownership going to Steele. Marquez is 8,200. I had him in 25% of lineups after the sim, and I feel like you're trying to get a little bit heavier than that. So talk to me about Marquez.
I think Marquez is borderline the second best pitching option on the slate behind Burns. This is a ridiculously good matchup against the Cubs. Since the trade deadline, when they traded most of their quality hitters, they have the highest strikeout in baseball by like 4 points, up over 30%. The Tigers are second at like 26.5%. They are 25th or 26th in pretty much every other offensive category, WRC plus, OPS, ISO. They're terrible. And now you're getting German Marquez, who's a very, very good pitcher. You're getting him outside of Coors Field. So far this season, he has a 26.9% strikeout percentage, 7.8% walk percentage, 3.42 xFIP in his games outside of Coors. The strikeout percentage is 3 points higher than in Coors. The walk percentage is about 2.5 points lower. xFIP is about 1/10 of a run lower. He's a really, really good pitcher. The only negative here is that it is relatively warm in Chicago. The wind is blowing out a bit, but it's not a true Wrigley wind game. I think Marquez should absolutely carve this team up. I think he's underpriced. I don't think he's drastically different than Jack Flaherty in terms of the upside and the matchup. And you're getting a $1,400 price difference. I absolutely love Marquez here.
I feel the same way. He shows up basically the same as Flaherty for me. Flaherty's pulling the ownership, the aggressive ownership. Marquez is not, but I have him in the very much the same ballpark in terms of overall chances of success. So I don't have anything to add. I like him as well. I don't get the sense we're talking about Justin Steele. So I think we're moving on to Rockies Bats. I have them 3rd overall. I have them 11th in leverage. To me, only Trevor Story is overowned. And if that's the case, I'm not super mad about Trevor Story pulling the ownership. I like getting to the Rockies here.
I think you might be a little higher on them than I am. I think the Rockies suck. I don't think Justin Steele is terrible. He's only made 2 starts in the majors, 13 total appearances. But overall, a 27.8% strikeout percentage in his starts. He has, where'd he go? He's only struck out 14.6% in his starts. It's not a bad spot. It's just the Rockies. Trevor Story, I think, is a good option. CJ Cron's a good option. Connor Joe is cheap. But outside of that, I just don't really see a whole lot that I like.
I'll say this. I have the line for the Rockies significantly lower than the current implied total. So I'm anxious to see where that actually ends up. If I used my line instead of the Vegas line for this, I think Colorado would be more in like the 7th or 8th range, sort of like our top stack tool. So that's something that I'm going to keep my eye on. But I do like the top of the order a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, they're just so bad outside of Coors Field. Like, it's a completely different offense.
And like I said, like I have the implied total at 4.8. I personally, in the stuff that I use for my sports betting, have the total at 4 for the Rockies. So they're getting an extra 0.8 of a run. That's going to be enough to drop them from my third spot. So something I'm going to look at throughout the day. I'm not looking to go to any Cubs bats. The Marquez ownership is helpful, but he's good, and these Cubs guys aren't.
Yeah, agreed. Just terrible offense. I mean, Schwindel's cheap, Ortega's cheap. There's some good pricing here, but I'm just not looking to pick on German Marquez with this team.
Brewers and Reds, 4.4 run implied total for the Brewers, 3.1 for the Reds. Corbin Burns and Tyler Mahle, 3% ownership going to Mahle, 48 going to Corbin Burns. I don't necessarily agree with 48, but to me, he's very clearly worth the price of admission today. Showed up in 32% of my sims. He is my top pitcher. I don't have much else to add other than I do think he's a bit over-owned, but I can't complain about it. It looks good still.
Yeah, I think clear, far and away, number one pitching option, just the best pitcher on the slate. 35% strikeout percentage, 2.33 xFIP, only a 4.5% walk percentage, only 0.35 home runs per 9. He is just a phenomenal pitcher, and he's not that expensive. So I'm with you as far as the ownership goes. It's not that I think Burns shouldn't get that kind of ownership. It's more so just that, like, there are plenty of spots you can pivot to if you need to save ownership. But it also, with it being a 14-game slate, I'm just going to be able to get to plenty of low-owned bats and or low-owned SP2s to where I'm going to be fine just getting Burns in the lineup. So typically I'll end up around the field, if not a little bit higher in spots like this on someone like Burns. I think in cash, if you don't have him, you're probably crazy. The Reds are also missing Winker, which is nice. They're not a bad offense, but you know, it's a very good spot to roster Burns overall, I think.
I can't justify Mahle at 9,900 today. Do you have any interest?
No, I mean, it's tough. Like whenever Tyler Mahle's getting 2% ownership, I'm interested, especially when the pitchers around him, you know, you look at the ownership. Jack Flaherty for $300 less is getting 22 times the ownership. Andrew Heaney's getting like 7 times the ownership. Charlie Morton's getting 8 times the ownership. But the thing is, there's just so many pitchers on this slate. I still have trouble getting to Mahle because I'm just going to end up going to other low-owned plays before I get there.
I have the Brewers bats as my number 2 leverage stack, but they are 19th overall. They're not pulling any ownership to speak of. We have them pretty low in the top stack tool, so kind of similar to where I have them. But again, no ownership at all. Do you have any interest in Milwaukee if they are just unowned today?
I have a little bit. I'd have more if Mahle were getting ownership, but Mahle's really good at getting strikeouts. He also does give up some power, though. 1.33 home runs per 9 this year. In particular, righties have done some damage against him with a 187 expected ISO. So looking to guys like Willy Adames, Avisail Garcia, I think those guys look pretty good. Christian Yelich, of course, is always going to look good. Narvaez is always one of the better catcher options. So I think it's an okay stack for Milwaukee in terms of upside. Not a bad park to hit in either, but also a huge slate where there's a lot of teams that I like a little bit more.
Yeah. Like I have Colton Wong, Yelich, Willy Adames, and all 4%ers, and they're all at 1% ownership. So it's not anything crazy. Their likelihood of success is just a bit too low for me. I don't want any Reds at all.
Yes, same boat.
Okay. Before we move on to the final 2 games, we've got 85 likes. That's not enough. We need triple digits is a minimum for all of these shows. So hit that thumbs up. Let's get over that 100 mark as we move to the Astros and the Royals. Luis Garcia, Brady Singer, 5.2 run implied total for the Astros, 3.4 for the Royals. Luis Garcia is 9,700. Brady Singer is 5,700. How do you feel about the pitching in this one?
Not too interested in either side. Luis Garcia is having a good season. He has struck out 28.9% of hitters, 3.68 xFIP. The issue is just that he doesn't go quite as deep into games as other pay-up options. He was pulled at 70 pitches after 5 innings in his last start, which also was against KC. But he hasn't reached 90 pitches in a start since June 30th. We've just seen Houston be pretty quick to get him out of games once he gets around that 85 pitch mark. And that's an issue when you're paying up for him on a slate where there's, all these other good pitchers to go to. Kansas City also not the best strikeout matchup because the top of their order with Merrifield, Lopez, Benintendi, Santana, they're all pretty difficult to strike out. It's the bottom of the order where you start picking them up, but obviously you're not facing those guys as frequently. So it's hard for me to get to Garcia. On the other side, I don't think Brady Singer is bad. He's one of Kansas City's top pitching prospects. He's had some success this year, not really in terms of strikeouts where he's been, slightly below average at 22%, but only a 4.17 exit, 0.73 home runs per 9. He's done a pretty good job limiting power. Not somebody that I really love picking on, but not someone I really want to roster here against the Astros either.
There's really not anything that I want to roster in general here. I have the Astros 13th, 14th in leverage. We have Houston 4th overall and not pulling all that much ownership, which is kind of interesting to me. Talk to me about the Astros against Brady Singer.
Yeah, so I don't really like the matchup that much because, like I said, Singer has been a pretty decent pitcher. He's not giving up a ton of power. What I do like, though, is Houston's ownership. It's kind of similar to Tampa Bay, where I don't love the matchup against Ranger Suarez, but I do think Tampa Bay has tons and tons of power in their lineup, and they're not getting much ownership, and it's not a horrible spot. That's kind of how I feel about the Astros as well. Singer has been good, but I would still rather be taking bats against Singer than a lot of pitchers on this slate, and the Astros bats are really good. You also have some favorable pricing. Michael Brantley's still 3,900. Correa's still 4,500. The bottom of the order will most likely be inexpensive, whether it's Taylor Jones, Chas McCormick, Jake Myers, some combination of those guys. And then, Yordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve are always strong options. So as long as the ownership stays down, I'm willing to take my chances here against Singer.
I thought they would be popping a little bit more for me. I'm really surprised that they're not, but they're solely in the middle of the pack. This is probably the biggest differentiator that I have from our top stack tool. So it's going to be a game that I put a pin in. Take a look at it again as we get back to live before lock later tonight. Are you going to any Royals bats against Garcia? It doesn't feel like the best spot.
No, I don't think so.
Well, we got to 100 likes, so kudos to everybody for that one. Now let's close it out with the game that we don't really know a lot about, or at least we didn't before we started. I don't know if anything has changed. Padres and Dodgers. I have it at 3.8 runs for the Padres, 4.2 for the Dodgers. Yu Darvish and Julio Urias. Have you seen anything different for either side of this game?
No, that's what I see. The latest news on DraftKings for Urias is from the 22nd with Dave Roberts saying that he is trending toward returning to start today. Haven't seen anything different since then.
Same situation for Darvish. I got Darvish in 9% of lineups when I ran my crunch, but I'm going to wait to find out if we have actual starting pitchers in this game first. Do you like Darvish if he goes here today?
Not really. I mean, it's a really, really tough spot. Darvish is good. He's one of the best strikeout pitchers on the slate, up around 30%. He's someone you can definitely make a case for in tournaments just based on his strikeout upside, but it's a really, really tough matchup against the Dodgers. There's pitchers I really like that aren't getting tons of ownership. It's hard for me to start pulling ownership from, for example, Marquez is getting 21% ownership. It's hard for me to start saying, oh, well, I'll turn some of that into paying 9,400 for Darvish against the Dodgers when really I just want to keep getting more Marquez.
Makes sense. Urias against the Pods?
Kind of the same answer. Really tough matchup. I think, the matchup probably a little bit better for Urias than it is for Darvish, but he's also priced up. He doesn't give you quite the strikeout upside that Darvish does. Still good at 26.5%, but not quite as high. Kind of just a stay away everywhere in this game, I think.
Are you staying away from bats as well?
I don't really see a reason to prioritize them. The Padres and the Dodgers are both offenses that fall into that Blue Jays category where at low ownership, they always make some sense just because they have so much power. But on a 14-game slate, those teams still just kind of end up getting pushed down a little bit because you can go to teams like Houston and Tampa Bay that also aren't getting much ownership.
I have the Padres 15th. I have the Dodgers 21st, so I don't really have anything else to add. I do think the Padres are a little under-owned, but at the same time, it's not going to be a driving force. So I think that we have just made our way through this entire slate. Let's sum it up. Favorite stacks as of right now?
Atlanta, Tampa, Houston.
Atlanta is definitely at the top for me. I do like the Angels and Red Sox. They do separate from the pack as my top two stacks, but they are over-owned, so I want to be aware of the way that I put those guys into my lineups. Top pitchers for today:
Marquez, Burns, Flaherty, Morton. Bumgarner, if you need to go cheap. God, it hurts to say that.
Everybody that you just said I agree with. Don't sleep on Jose Barrios.
Don't sleep on Tanner Houck either.
Ooh, there we go. That one is one I would be willing to sleep on, I think. So I appreciate you saying that. Anything else you want to add? Anything you got to plug before we get out of here?
Deep dive will be up in a few hours. I'll be back on the deeper dive at 4:45.
There it is, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Shout out to OddsShopper for being the presenting sponsor of this show. Hit that like button on your way out the door. Subscribe to this channel, to Awesemo Odds, to Awesemo Fantasy Football. We have a ton of content every single day. You don't want to miss it. Even subscribe to our podcast feeds. You got to get that Betting You plug in. Ben Raza and Matt Kajeski. Good luck today, everybody. We'll both be back for other shows later today. Peace.